Douglas Bloch. I'm an author and depression survivor. Welcome to your Depression Recovery channel, where each week we talk about practical tools and coping strategies for healing from anxiety and depression. In my video series called Life in a Psychiatric Ward, I talked about how hospitalization is a valid option when people are so disabled by depression or anxiety that they can't take care of themselves or they're a danger to themselves or others. What I didn't mention was how difficult it actually is to get a bed on a ward. So I'd like to start with a quote from an article that appeared in the New York Times called "Bedlam on the Streets," and it says, "Increasingly, the mentally ill have nowhere to go. That is their problem and ours." Yes, there is a shortage of psychiatric beds in America. There have been numerous occasions where my clients who have been disabled by depression have been waiting in the ER room for 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 days in order for a bed to open up in a local hospital. And even when they were lucky enough to get a bed, their stay was so short that they were discharged in a couple of days, not enough time to do any real healing. Here's another example. I think back to my previous depressive episode and my first hospital stay. I remember a roommate I had, I'll call him Bill. He was admitted the previous night because his wife had found him wandering in the woods with a gun threatening to kill himself. So I met him over breakfast and I said, "Bill, what's your treatment plan?" He said, "I don't know, I'm getting discharged this afternoon." I said, "That's impossible, you were just admitted last night, you can't be going the very next day." But unfortunately, Bill was right. By the end of the day, he was gone and I had a new roommate. I often think about this guy, wondering if he's still alive in spite of the system that failed him. I did not fare much better than Bill. I was discharged just 72 hours after I was admitted, just as the major tranquilizers I had been given were wearing off. The intense agitation and anxiety that had brought me to the hospital was not resolved. How could it be? What I needed was a place where I could have a true respite. Just as I was about to give up hope, I learned of a facility, a residential facility that would maybe fit my needs. It was called Hazel Springbrook. It was an alcohol and drug treatment center located 45 minutes outside of Portland. Actually, Robin Williams had stayed there briefly. And this place seemed ideal for me. I'm actually going to read to you some of the not facilities, but some of the amenities that it has. First of all, it has a minimum 28-day residency with a possible 60-day extension, not the 72-hour stuff where you're out on the streets before you can even blink your eye. Also, it has group and individual therapy. It has a pool where you can work out in. It has really good food by the Marriott Services. It's got a beautiful campus where you can walk around the paths. And most importantly, in about 50 to 80% of the cases, the insurance pays for it. There was, however, one small catch. One had to be a drug addict or an alcoholic to be admitted. I called the admissions people and said, "You know, I'm not into drugs or alcohol, I'm not an addict or alcoholic, but I'm in as much pain as one." They said, "I'm sorry, you don't meet our criteria." I said, "Well, wait. You're telling me that if I develop a chemical dependency and suffer from depression, then you'll take me in and I'll get to be in this beautiful holistic healing facility. But if I resist the urge to self-medicate and I resist the urge to drink and I don't have these conditions, then I can't come in." She said, "Yes, I'm afraid we don't make the rules, but that's exactly true." So this is what I learned from the conversation. Hazelden was a great place. The majority of people who were in the facility had depression and anxiety, but to get the benefits of being treated for your mental illness, you also had to have a chemical dependency. So what's the logical conclusion? Go out and become an addict or an alcoholic. After this conversation, I was so desperate to find help that I realized the only way I was going to do so was to become a drug addict or an alcoholic, to develop chemical dependency diagnosis so I could get into Springbrook and be treated for the depression, which all the other residents in there were being treated for, or many of them. And I thought this was a crazy idea until I read a book called Prozac Nation. And this is what the author says. Her name is Elizabeth Wurtzel, and this is what she wrote. "I found myself wishing for a real ailment. Found myself longing to be a junkie or a cokehead or something. It seemed to me that if I could get hooked on some drug, anything was possible. I'd make friends. I'd have a real problem. I'd be able to walk into a church basement full of fellow sufferers and have them all say, 'Welcome to our nightmare. We understand. Here are our phone numbers. Call anytime you feel like you're slipping because we're here for you.'" As Elizabeth Wurtzel and I discovered, it is easier to be a drug addict or an alcoholic in this culture in terms of access to treatment anyway. It seems that depression does not have a visible picture. it's not tangible enough for people to really take seriously. And since depressives don't drive their BMWs into trees or do things that are really destructive, they kind of go unnoticed. Maybe this is why depression is the leading cause of suicide in America. I hope that one day, when the stigma of mental illness is gone, or at least is diminished tremendously, that depression will be taken more seriously and there will be inpatient facilities where you can stay for 10 or 20 or 30 days with really good care, instead of struggling to find a psychiatric bed, which is now the case. In conclusion, I hope that someday when the stigma of mental illness is lessened or completely gone, that people with psychiatric illnesses will have the same access to medical care as people with physical illnesses. Can you imagine someone with a heart attack waiting in an ER room for 2 days to be seen? Unthinkable. And yet, that's what happens when people have psychiatric crises. This has been Douglas Bloch. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you want to learn more about my work, you can go to healingfromdepression.com, or you can click on the links in the closing credits. And until we meet again, I wish you the best in your mental health recovery. Thank you.